Well, got ready to do this whole intro since I accidentally made my USB unplug. Pretty much my branded blue eyes deck for budget for most of the people is still the same. Still using 3 blue eyes, still using 3 white stones. I still find maxing usable more recently. Sometimes, like for some matches when I'm bricked hard, if they don't ash me. Or just mostly get ash bait out of hand. Still using iron. I'm still using 2 Albaz personally, but I'm actually starting to have the mind to make a more branded deck essentially in the future. Since it has more utility wise, mostly you use a lot more effects. I'm still using Luber mostly for its effect to search out branded fusion. Still using HRD, still standard, Destiny or Dasher to go and do things in the Forcer. 2 Eternal Whites, 1 Dragon Spirit White, mostly for its Bash effect, Bash spell. Still using 2 Jets, mostly one's backup plan, but if nothing else, I can Omni negate destruction cards. 1 Nibiru, because some matches are still happening. One person actually played it smart, but they should have at least attacked. I slowly trade in, but still prefer 2, personally. Since I prefer Melody more over trade in, since I'm not using that many level 8s as before though, but about only 6 of them I actually need tributes, while the other 2 just needs 2 lives, which is at least a decent odds, or using Dictator D mostly. Still using Fission and Destiny, mostly. Branded. I'm still keeping Branded Edition, but I find that with the engine wise, you might as well incorporate Branded along with Fusion Destiny every time because it works together at least. It also allows you to go in since their first fusion, Albin and Searing, were actually the targets you actually need to actually utilize the fusion in the first place. To actually have a third method, technically a fourth way without utilizing Predaplant to do it. The only thing is you discard or shuffle back in deck, but it's whatever. So too Call Graves, but personally you should craft Call by Graves point. Especially Ashes you need. These two, like, you can probably do with Almaxes if you feel like it still. That's my personal opinion. But it's still, like, worth teching. Ashes Stang. Call Cross that Designator. Personally, this is a good one-up still. Since most people so far run Maxis, most matches, Ash, Rigeki, Imperms. From there, like, probably different hand traps though, but your main ones are probably going to see are Max, Ash, and Imperm mostly, and Call by the Grave. Those are the 4 main targets you probably will face a lot more in most decks, while some other hand traps are needed. Ultimate Fusion I'm still utilizing, just so when something is destroyed or getting banished, I can chain link with, so that target's no longer there. 2 Imperms, it's just obvious reasons. Also, Ultimate Fusion, I can also target cards up to Blue Eyes, so I can also destroy cards, at least from most of my Blue Eyes targets, being alternative and alternate. Being alternative and regular. Next time, Ultimate Creature Destruction, so Blue Eyes gets destroyed. Personally, you could run more. Personally, at least one more, maybe alongside one more Destined Rivals over Maxis, if you feel like it. Destined Rivals, slowly rising because of what it does. True Light. Fusion wise, I'm slowly utilizing all 4 still. Slowly utilizing this, my Tyrant Royal Finish version. My Royal Finish as our Silver Eyes. Spirits. Numeron. Dragonloon. Hope. These 3 are just mostly targets, mostly utilize Dragonloon. Like these 2 should be obvious. Numeron isn't the main target to win though, if you can afford to, but if you can't, better play it safe than sorry. Hopebringer is pretty much actually the 1P, mostly if you want to go into it a lot, but I haven't gone into it recently a lot more. if I don't have materials, which is more consistent, I feel like, versus using a pure Blue Eyes deck, which utilizes more agents essentially to work with. More of the Blue Eyes tag in. From there, pretty much actually, I run Heretic Sky Dragon Overlord. Also, here's an idea. You can always just utilizing Searing Alternative to go into Hope or Dragonmaid. I still use it since it targets cards in my field, and also it's good also against the whole branded matchup. If you have an idea what they're utilizing, go into it instantly. Zombie Vampire, I'm actually just thinking of just maybe crafting one more Searing just so I have more fusion targets. But this thing's still useful at least. Fire Plant, obvious. From there, here's also what some matches I did face recently, which surprised me today. What facing mostly was the Violins. I actually faced it 2 times this whole game so far, and from there, pretty much, I will not go into it. I can go into details since I don't remember which ones I faced. Okay, first matchup was against Rockets. As usual, I'm so used to facing this point, it's ridiculous that when I don't face them, it just feels weird. I faced them like once while pair ranks. I really went into detail a lot of most of the combos, I feel like, or faced a lot. Enough that I don't feel like I need to go into deck intro for it. Overall, my hand here was alright. It was decent. I can use Call by the Grave. But I was wondering when to target or not. Next up, I went to that, mostly so I can refuse into Azure Mirror Jades. Oh, I also have a second copy. Put Call by the Grave. Somehow Jets. So I can omni-negate. My point is just to realize what they added. They should just target monsters. Otherwise, they would have gone into everything. I said across it. I baited out across a Designator, which was interesting for me. The only thing is, I'm surprised they use Dark Ruler no more. At least, it's some more surprising. From here, I was expecting Arc Rebellion of all things. From here, it all comes down to my point has, but it can't be destroyed. My hand was just bricked. I decided to go into this. If nothing else, I can utilize it for materials. I decided to go into Rebellion. I decided to turn those two to go into my my own Mirror Jade again. Next up, I go for OTK here. I could have gone for it. I could have gone Nimron though, but with those two materials. But I decided I need to get some dailies out either way, so I don't mind too much. That will explain some of my plays. Luber essentially negates that card. Called by the Grave, they got rid of Mirror Jade. What I kind of need to do is actually get a monster essentially out this daily, and I still need to get 2 off today. I still need to get that daily out as well. Essentially, the fact that I drew alternative and I actually had this, it's hilarious. Since I get instruction out of the way. Next up, I use Call by Infusion, but I really wish I went to Monster Beating at least. Just so I can actually get that daily done with that time. Next up is Dragonmaid with a little bit of makeshift. With the genome material, which I guess is alright. But it's a really niche hand trap probably, pretty much. Since, while you're discarding, you can make that card can't be linked or such, it makes it useful against branded decks in general, or decks that utilize it. Next up, typical most of your actual Dragonmaids, but utilizes the Fallen Abed since most of it since like a decent chunk at least cannot be used, so I do not understand the branded aspect. Like, you only got, you might as well just use the better options a little bit, but it's most stuff I expected. On my list is Super Ollie still, because I might just use that because I have to at least. A little bit in the future. Most of this deck is most of what I expected, but I was surprised by Branded of this of all things. Because all the varieties, I was like, this is probably the most interesting one I've seen so far. Well, at least of all the varieties. Oh, sorry about the perfect, dude. I didn't see what my opponent was going to do, so I was like, what the heck are you doing here? Send that out to mostly fuse. Go into Searing skill. Send my Libera Grave. Be sure to attack the deck to go into Mirror Jade. Next up, I utilize Branded Fusion. Go into Searing here. Go into those, mostly for like fuse one more time. One more. My opponent was just going for that. The fact is, they should go on into whatever they hand. And after this match, I was like curious, what the heck am I facing? Because Dragonmaids do more than just this. Did they brick that badly? That was the one thing I was curious about when I was going through the matchup. Next up, Sky Trackers. Everything's a Sky Tracker stuff. The typical engine stuff. If you haven't seen Sky Trackers, then you usually know what to do at this point, I feel like. Because it's the most typical gold deck a little bit, with a little bit of platinum, I think. That face, but the only charmer thing is I found weird is probably Hilta. But it makes sense a little bit, but I don't think it's actually worth it for fire decks, since you don't first fire a whole lot of times. You're more likely to face water mirrors. Everything else is usually a staple of. The only thing I don't see is update jammer, but that's the typical thing I usually see. Oops. Tag my mic when I was just trying to adjust my same position. Overall, I thought my hand was alright. Since I technically have it out for an outs and stuff. As soon as I saw this, I was like, what the heck are they trying to pull off here? Because most of the options... I decided to go into Searing here. Go on into this. Except personally, opponent used Effect Veiler early, which I was happy about. Use Trade In, discard Jet to draw 2. Use Melody, discard that. I should have. I didn't care. I also got Trinif, especially on Lure. Get my last Blue Eyes in my grave. Essentially, my opponent made it doesn't matter. I could have gone into Branded though, but I also was trying to get my Ash out. Which did give me at least some to win. I should activate Fusion Destiny. I actually thought I still had one more card, but I want to get my Jet out first, if I can bait out Ghost and such. Essentially, trying to get my Jet back in the field. Essentially, I realize my opponent's doing here to essentially try and get my Phoenix Force back in my deck. And I don't have the materials for it, and I can only do one option. The fact is, I just drew Imperm. I said I put Dasher back in my grave. Essentially got rid of both, but I utilized the fusion. I said I go into Heretic. Because I knew that they had an out to target stuff in my fields, so I decided to go into that. I decided to go into that. Mostly it's my monster destroyed. I can go into this. But it's mostly making me targeting it. I didn't have other outs essentially for Branded's point, so I was like, it was just like I could bait something out. Make it so it doesn't target my field, but I regret it. Imperm there. This is where I'm like, what the heck is my opponent doing? They know I had it face down. What monster did I target? What monster did I target? My alternative? All they would have gotten rid of is pretty much a lot of my stuff though, but it would have had to target my J either way. It would not win a game. Essentially just use a removal, but it wouldn't matter there. Essentially, the reason I went into that play for that card was specifically that reason. Next opponent deck. Protecting Spirits, Majesty Happen, but also a social does. I'm just gonna butcher the card, the archetype. Trust me on this. So I'm just gonna say Solfachord. The card is essentially with Majesty Happen, which I thought was interesting. This deck at least was something I hadn't faced before, so I was like, what's the difference? Let's see, is this one right? Yeah. At the very least, I'm trying to make sure at least I'm right. Essentially, my hand was bricked, so I decided to go for Jet, draw 2. Go into this, go into discard that, go into Alternative. Essentially, I got everything I needed for everything. Turn that to active field, use Branded Fusion. Go to Branded. Go into my Mirror Jade. Since I'm outside, I'm locked out links, so I go into Jet. Essentially, I didn't see anything that's worthwhile yet to actually make them do. I said alternate fusion. Since they were going to return most of my stuff back to my hand, I decided to not do it. It would have been risky. It returns all monsters correspond to, and they didn't want Mirror Jade out yet. But they're also going to X-ray until it goes to length grading of this. So they will extend it, so I figured it wasn't worth it. They essentially bash my own card. I hope the next blow I support actually makes it so they can't choose a target stuff. Essentially negate it. I decided to just do that so that this card also by procs my second jet back in the field. Essentially, they're trying to straw mail cards, but lucky for me, I put Call About the Grave to they target one card. Essentially, this was just beat down at this point. After this whole fight, I hated the archetype, but it makes Aldrich less annoying for what it does. That's what I felt like in that duel. Next up, Drolock. Oh, Orcust. Orcust engine. Orcust deck. Most of it should be familiar at this point, I feel like. What the little miner and scrap recycler. Alongside World Legacy card. Most of it's typical stuff I expect to see. With IP being the main thing as well, Barricade. Access code, the only thing I'm surprised about, I didn't see anything else this whole fight. It's gonna take me that long for at least get the timestamps ready for this. I'm just glad I didn't get the troll since I mostly have been dead this whole match, I feel like. A resource army. I'm gonna get a knight. Essentially spend. I tried to chain it with the max C. But they had Ashwort. Concerning I would have dealt with it in my melody or in the replay next turn, I'm okay with getting rid of it now. Essentially, Orcust Bible is the worst card I actually experienced since it allows you to chain link everything in Grave. Essentially, I was like, I wish I had Ash still. I wish I might hand it Ash. Forbidden Droplet apparently had it out, so at least I'm glad I got rid of as much as possible out. Essentially, my opponent going to link. Essentially, now that I think about it, back then, I should have got rid of Blue Eyes a little bit, but Jet was the play I actually needed. Since I call it my one alternative. The only thing I'm wondering is why my opponent had their last face down. Let's go back to the deck afterwards. That brings in my Jet. Going to Little Bait, going to Private Plant. My opponent didn't feel like dealing with everything at this point. Since they didn't have much of it out. It was this one, right? Yep. Since the only stuff it could have been was probably some bait or some droplets, I think, or just, it had gotten one imperm to essentially won this game. At least start, so I think it's either that. I had some proc at least happened, so that was my guess. Next up, this is the one match that I was like, I'm proud at least I won since I was playing against Despia, aka Branded deck. With Prayer Plant stuff. Starving Venom. The only thing I'm really sad about is most of the space stuff is mostly just URs. So that's mostly making it annoying to craft. The only thing I understand is their prayer plan option. Most of it's the usual stuff where I see for Branded. overall, I was like, my opening hand's pretty good. I could essentially go to Melody, but as soon as I saw Branded, I was like, oh, are you kidding me already? This is like one of the times where I wish I had Nibiru, since this would have been fusion number 2. Fusion number 3 is happening right now. They decided to banish their own stuff mostly, so you can utilize it. You go to Masquerade, but they utilize it for target wise. Since it's banished, they can target one of the monsters summon. That would have been 4, but would have bricked otherwise, so I'm like, it's alright. But essentially, I wish I got the Maxis last turn instead. Go into Generative. Essentially, I did it so I could bait it out. They decided to fusion on time, so I decided to ash it so at least I get one new card. Sadly for them, I decided to go my blue eyes back in my deck, go in Tyrant. My opponent sadly DC'd it on this point, but I figured it's like worthwhile at least. Of what could have been at least a decent match, but I still had Fusion Destiny, but I probably waited one more turn to utilize it. Sadly, this whole match I'm about to show you against Despia, I essentially was just breaking in general. Essentially, I was just breaking badly, so I can't do it. Also, here's what it looks like for Branded roll finish. If you haven't seen it. They're also utilizing cards like Firetail, essentially Imp Engine. But everything has super... It's just the typical stuff I see mostly. Essentially, my hand was good for what I had, but essentially, it's not good going first hand. It's better converting second hand. I was like, why would it want to get rid of Ash at this point immediately? That was my first thought. I was like, puzzle at this point, ridiculous. Most of my hand was not ready for what I had. I looked at it and had a second one. I also chained it with it. So at the very least I can prep some stuff, but also I can just send cards to the grave. I figured also I found all best in hand, so which I already figured. Essentially here I was just bricked so badly. It would have been decent if I talked like anything I actually needed. Next up, Cyber Dragon deck. Nothing new. The only difference is it's running. It's a little cyber deck with just falling on beds, mostly for search engine, mostly search engine. Just to have two engines combined with a little bit of edge imp alongside this. With all shot all stuff, but they only have one shot all. But I figured when I was looking over it, I was like, there have so many agent all over the place. It was ridiculous. Overall, but Royal, regular rare. Overall, last match. Overall, my hand was alright. But I decided to bait out some stuff. I used Ditcher D first. Nothing else, then nothing. But I was like, they didn't ask it for that. Then a special alternative, get a jet. For anything else, I would have thought they would love me to at least get rid of. I send jets mostly so I was second hit jet in hand. Go into prayer plants. Since I didn't have anything, I decided to send Fusion Destiny. Going into Phoenix Forcer. Next up, pretty much, I figure at this point they should have chained it at least. They need to remember that, and I still got second jet, so I can special summon. But that was all it is. I was like, oh no way, I am not getting rid of that. As soon as I saw that, I was like, they have no way to fusion at this point. I was like, this is an easy dub. Going to Libin. Get rid of him. I figured that. And go into Mirror Jade. Overall, my opponent was just not ready at all. Overall, I was more wondering what the heck they have fusion-wise at that point. If they can do it. Overall, this is the end of the video. I hope you guys like, comment, and subscribe if possible. Have a good day or night, wherever you are.